Alright, so for the last of our 3 installation guides, we have EndeavourOS. This is what you'll first see after you reboot your computer with an EndeavourOS flash drive installed in it. And basically we have 2 options here that you should be looking at. Either EndeavourOS default, if you have an AMD or an Intel graphics card, or EndeavourOS NVIDIA, if you have an NVIDIA graphics card. And this will give you those proprietary NVIDIA drivers. This one will run on every graphics card, but it'll use the non-proprietary NVIDIA drivers, so you might want to have to go and get those proprietary drivers later. I would just recommend going with the install that best suits your graphics card configuration. So for me, that's default. I'll hit enter. And then I will see a lot of information here as EndeavourOS begins its first boot into that live environment. After you're booted into EndeavourOS, you'll have this nice little install window with also a few little things that you might want to look into. So if you need to, say, partition your drive to make sure that you keep a Windows or Mac OS install, you can do that here in Partition Manager. If it starts off and it's not in your native resolution, you can click on the Change Display Resolution to make it better fit your monitor or display. But for me, all I need to do now is to start the installer. I'll choose my installation method. For me, this will be online. I'm on a wired connection, so I don't have to configure anything here. If you are on a wireless connection, you will have to sign into your wireless network. All right, so on the EndeavourOS installer, the first thing it's going to do is ask us a few questions, like our language. For me, it has correctly detected American English as my language, so I'll hit next. Then it'll ask for our time zone. Again, New York and America, the Eastern time zone works fine for me, but if you need to change that, first you'll select the area, and then you can go through and select the exact time zone that you're on. So I'll just hit next. Then it'll ask for our keyboard layout. For me, English US default is perfect, right? It's all I need to really think about when I'm using my keyboard. This is great. The next thing that EndeavourOS asks us is what desktop we want to install when we install the software. Okay, you can choose to have no desktop at all, just a completely terminal interface, which I don't really recommend for beginners. And what I like about EndeavourOS is when you click on these options, it will show you what that desktop environment looks like. So if I click here on XFCE4, you'll see this is kind of how XFCE looks in EndeavourOS. Or this is how Plasma KDE, which we installed in the Fedora video, looks. Or GNOME, which we installed in our Debian video, right? You also see we have Cinnamon, Mate, Budgie, LXDE, and LXQT. LXDE and LXQT are kind of just really lightweight desktops, maybe for lower powered systems. For another option, we have the i3 Window Manager, which I really like window managers. I think that they're excellent. I don't think that they're the most new user friendly. You have to know kind of some keybinds to get them up and working. And I think it's better to configure those yourself instead of letting your operating system configure those. And we'll go into tutorials of how to do that in later videos. For me, the desktop environment I'm going to go with is Budgie. I really like Budgie. I think it's a great little desktop. It's not got a lot of pre-installed packages, which I enjoy. And I'm just going to hit next. Then it'll just ask you for what kind of basic packages that you want to install with your installation. Really, as long as you have which desktop you want clicked and these desktop base and Firefox and language package, you're probably fine. Something you might want to look into, though, is if you have a printer, you might want printing support, or specifically support for HP printers and scanners, or if you need accessibility tools like screen readers. These can all be found here in this first little package install. So for me, this is all I need. I'm going to hit next. It'll ask for our bootloader, which we should leave as default here where it's selecting Grub. Next, what we have is the option to partition our disk and where we want to install EndeavourOS. So for me, this is the only disk on this system, and I don't care if it wipes it to install EndeavourOS. If you do care, again, make sure that you go in and do manual partitioning. But for me, it's fine, so I can just hit Erase Disk. And then by default, EndeavourOS does not have a swap partition. Swap is basically where if your system runs out of memory and it needs to throw things to your drive, how much space you allow for that. So I am just going to use a swap with no Hibernate, which will just give us about 3 or 4 gigs here in our swap partition. That's a personal preference, but I do recommend that you do it. So I'll hit next. And then we'll need to add some login information. So I'm just going to use Cass as my name, and you'll see that EndeavourOS autofills that for our username and even for the name of our PC as Cass-VirtualBox because I'm in a virtual machine. Next, I'll make a password, which I'm just going to use as YES here to make things easy. And we have this nice little checkbox here for use the same password for the administrator account. All right, so for your root user, for when you have to type in sudo and do a administrator privileged application or process, you can use this, and that way it'll be the same password that you use when you log in. I like that personally, so I'll hit next. This is basically a summary screen of everything that we're installing and how we're setting everything up. So it all looks good to me. I'm going to hit install and then install now. This might take a few minutes and I'll be back when it's finished. Eventually, you'll be met with this screen, which tells you that EndeavourOS is properly installed. We'll click on this little Restart Now checkbox, and then we'll hit Done, and EndeavourOS will begin to restart. When you first boot into EndeavourOS, this is what you'll see. It has a few after install tasks that it feels like most people won't want to mess around with. You can change your desktop resolution again. You can change the default wallpaper from here. You can update your system. You can, clean up some old packages that it might not be using anymore. You can select what you're welcomed on, like which tab here it brings you to. But for me, I'm just going to go ahead and close this out because I know what I would like to do. And even if you do close this to follow along, it'll still show up the next time that you boot. Okay, so everything should be fine. So I'm going to go ahead and close this. And then one thing that is not as new user friendly with EndeavourOS is that it does not have a package manager that is visual from the start, right? It does not have a graphical package manager to get you started with. So how do we get our packages then? Well, the first thing that we'll need to do is we're going to update our system. So let's launch a terminal here, which is just down in the bottom left-hand corner. We'll launch our terminal. And then we'll type in the following, yay-syu. We'll hit enter. And then we'll have to type in our super user password or our administrator password. Again, in installation, we set this to be the same as our login password. So it says, hey, there's nothing to do. AUR is up to date. Everything is already updated. That's great. So now that we've seen that our system is up to date, what we're going to do is we will install a graphical package manager, just because I do think it'll be easier for a lot of beginners who are used to more of an app store ecosystem to find their applications. So what we need to do is we'll type yay, which is kind of like our package manager here. It's really not. Our package manager is Pacman, but yay works with our package manager and uses the Arch user repository at the same time. We'll type in -s, which means that we're going to install. And then I'm going to type in ba. Here, we'll just hit enter, 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 and enter. It'll go through, it'll install everything that we need to install ba. And now we should be complete here. I'm just going to clear the terminal. And then I'm going to exit out of it for the time being. So now what I need to do is to launch ba. How do I get to it? Well, I can either go down here to my applications launcher, or I can just press the Windows key or the command key if you're on macOS. And what I'll do here is I'll just type in BAU, and you'll see it brings up applications, right? That's the name of the actual app that it'll run. So we'll click here on applications. It'll need our password to continue here because it's using administrator privileges. It's going to make sure everything is up to date. And then we can just go and, hey, we want some new software. Let's get Discord running here on EndeavourOS. It's as easy as searching for it, and then there is Discord. You also have Discord Canary, which is like a developer build. It's just a lot of nice little packages we could install here for Discord. There's even some that'll do like command line Discord, right? But we just want that plain, clear, normal Discord package. We'll click install. We'll hit yes. And now, after it's went through that short little process, we should just be able to hit our Windows key or go down to the bottom left again, type in Discord, and we'll see that Discord has properly installed. It'll have to do a few updates, but now Discord is ready to go and prompts you to log in. One of the great things about Arch is that Pacman and Yay, by extension, already have some paid software in them, so we don't have to use Flatpaks like we might with Fedora or Debian. To demonstrate another one, I'm just going to go ahead and type in Pacman, and I could use Yay for this as well, -s Steam. It'll tell me, hey, you can't perform this operation unless you are root, which is fine. So I could just either retype sudo pacman-s steam, and again, sudo just means, hey, use administrator privileges. Or what I could type here is sudo and then 2 exclamation points, and then I'll say, hey, that last operation I wanted to do that as an administrator. It'll ask for my password. I'll just hit 1. And again, it'll ask if I want to install these. In this case, I don't because I'm on a virtual machine, but you can see how easy it is to go ahead and get Steam up and running. So I'll just hit no, and it'll exit me out of that. So the next thing that we'll need to do is we'll get some of the basic software that you'll need to run your system, right? Not just Discord, Steam, Spotify, those kind of things, but things like word processors and maybe a general text editor. So what we'll do is we'll go down here to our applications launcher. We will launch the application store again. And then what we're going to search for is Only Office, which is kind of like a Microsoft Office competitor. So we'll just install Only Office here. We'll hit yes. Now that that's done, you'll see there's an uninstall option here next to Only Office. But what we're going to do is we'll go ahead and launch it. We can either do that by going to Applications Launcher again, or by pressing our Windows key and just start typing Only Office. What I like about Only Office is kind of like Microsoft 365, it puts everything in one application. So if I want to start a document, I can go ahead and start here. And what I like is that by default, it goes ahead and saves it in .docx, right, which is the Microsoft format. Because of this, you'll easily be able to share documents back and forth with people who are still on macOS or Windows and not have to worry about, oh, is there going to be some kind of weird compatibility error here, right? It's all using docx, so it'll all be fine. So as you can see, EndeavourOS does not come with a ton of prepackaged software, right? It has a few things that you'll probably need to use. It has your settings for your budgie desktop, and then everything else is pretty much, did we install it or is it a system application, right? I like that, personally. I like not having a lot of bloat on my system, not a lot of pre-installed apps. That way I can have exactly what I want, right? If I prefer to use only Office, which I do, I don't want to have a system that starts with LibreOffice installed, so I have to uninstall it and then install only Office. Also, as I said, Arch and EndeavourOS are not as beginner-friendly. They do rely more on the terminal than Fedora or Debian would for the most part, but I feel like you can really get a lot out of Arch and EndeavourOS. Hope that your install went smoothly, that you enjoyed this video, and that you learned something from it. Thank you very much.